Hi everyone. Tonight's going to be the first of a lot of lessons through the end of the year where we're going to be looking at all the things that we have not yet got to from the causes of the Civil War up through the Civil War and Reconstruction. I want you to keep these videos. I want you to learn from these videos. I want you to have them available to you when you prepare for your AP US History 2 test. So they're going to be to the point, but you can always stop them and start them and go back and review them. So in many ways, they'll be ideal. So the first one I want to do tonight really picks up where we left off. In fact, it's a lot of review, compromise and conflict. Except in this video, I'm going to go one step further. We're going to offer some explanation as to why compromises in this period of time didn't resolve conflict. It seemed to cause more. So let's go. And let's look at the first compromise that we looked at. You already have the notes, so I don't have to be comprehensive in what I'm explaining. I really want to just frame the issue. The Compromise of 1850 was really the creation of a number of senators, but formed by Henry Clay, the great compromiser. And he provided two big benefits to the North and two big benefits to the South. For the North, he said California should come in as a free state. That would create imbalance, 16 free, 15 slave, but that would be the benefit for the North. In addition, there would be no more slave trade or slave auctions in our nation's capital, Washington, D.C. For the South would get the opportunity to get slavery in the Southwest Territory. Popular sovereignty would decide the issue in the territories created out of the Mexican Cession. Popular sovereignty, again, is that the issue of slavery would be decided by some democratic process by the people in the territory. And the South would get a stronger fugitive slave law. We'll be talking more about that in a minute. Finally, to complete the compromise, Texas would be compensated $10 million for some land that they lost as it was given to the Mexican Cession territory. So, 5 parts. He tried to pass it all won a big omnibus bill, but it didn't work. So Stephen Douglas, a young senator from Illinois, came in, broke it apart into 5 different bills, and each bill passed. The Compromise of 1850. Now, 4 parts of that compromise were not controversial, but the stronger fugitive slave law created a lot of conflict. Remember, that's the law that said an accused fugitive could not testify, could not call witnesses, and could not get a trial by jury. An accused fugitive also would come before a commissioner, and the commissioner would get $10 if he sent him to slavery, or her, and $5 if the accused was set free. This created a lot of resentment in the North, and they really resisted in 3 different ways. 1, many northern states nullified the law, passed personal liberty laws, which the South resented because they got a lot of criticism for their nullification of the Tariff of 1832. 2, activity in the Underground Railroad greatly increased. Now this metaphorical railroad would take the passengers or slaves led by conductors or abolitionists to safe houses throughout the South, the stations, to their ultimate destination in Canada. And then finally, Uncle Tom's Cabin. Uncle Tom's Cabin was a novel by Harriet Beecher Stowe that started a national discussion about the morality or the immorality of slavery and painted a very different picture of the slave institution than the South wanted to be out there. The South said, that's not our institution. And so the South resented that discussion and the popularity of this book, particularly in the North. So the South was upset about the North's resistance. The North was upset about the stronger fugitive slave law. And the North and the South seemed to have more conflict than ever on the issue of slavery. Compromise had led to conflict. 4 years later, we have another act that would lead to conflict, the Kansas-Nebraska Act. Now, you remember the background. Stephen Douglas, a senator from Illinois, wanted to ensure that the Transcontinental Railroad would go through his state to enrich his state and himself. To do that, though, he had to organize the Louisiana Territory. So to get Southern votes, he thought, I'm going to have to open it up a little bit, potentially, to slavery. So here's what he did. Kansas-Nebraska Act. This, by the way, is very easy to remember. It's repeal, divide, decide. Repeal, divide, decide. Repeal. First thing he says, we have to repeal the Missouri Compromise, at least that provision that says all territory above the 3630 line is free. Forever free is how it was worded. Repeal that. Once that's repealed, two, we'll divide that territory into two territories, Kansas and Nebraska. And then three, we will decide the issue of slavery in those two territories by popular sovereignty. The people of the territory will decide whether it's free or slave by democratic process. That was his proposal. Douglas won enough Southern votes to go with some Northern votes to get it passed. But this compromise, like the Compromise of 1850, had one provision that would cause greater conflict: popular sovereignty. See, this is the first time we're ever going to try this, and we tried it in a territorial election in 1855. And in the first territorial elections for Kansas, there were 2,905 voters registered. There were 6,307 votes cast. That's not good math. And it's not a good election. And the reason is because so many people came from neighboring Missouri, border ruffians, pro-slavery people, to vote in that Kansas election. So it was an overwhelming victory for pro-slavery legislators. I think it was 37 of the 39 legislators elected were pro-slavery. Well, the two anti-slavery legislators did not go to serve. In fact, they contributed with others to a second election that pro-slavery people didn't vote in, and it elected an all anti-slavery government. The pro-slavery government set up in Lecompton, the anti-slavery government set up in Topeka, and here we have our first exercise of popular sovereignty. Two illegitimate elections, electing two illegitimate governments in a territory where people are arguing about the most intense issue. So of course, in the absence of government, you're going to have violence. The first violence was in Lawrence, Kansas. A lot of people came from New England and elsewhere who were anti-slavery, and they started publishing anti-slavery tracts and newspapers. The Lecompton government had immediately passed a law that was not allowed and forbade such publications. Some pro-slavery people thought they would enforce that law with a little bit of vigilantism. They went into Lawrence, threw the printing presses in the river, burned down the newspaper buildings and looted homes, destroyed the town. The people of the town, of course, ran, and that saved many lives. But John Brown, an abolitionist who thought he was God's sent messenger on earth to rid this country of slavery, John Brown was angered by that. He was angered that they ran. He was angered about the pro-slavery people and their violence, so he thought he would meet violence with violence. So on a given night around a place called Pottawatomie Creek, he and his boys and a few other men went out, and I think they went to 5 different households, or I can't remember how many households, but they pulled out 8 men. They exonerated 3 and let them go. They convicted 5 and hacked them to pieces with their broadswords, because I guess that's what God wanted. John Brown's bloodshed that night, executing men without trial, only created more bloodshed. So much bloodshed, over 200 deaths in, can't remember, 2-3 years, that it got a nickname, Bleeding Kansas. And if you read in your textbook, I don't want to go too long, but if you read in your textbook, the violence even reached the United States Senate. So, you got to ask why. Why in this period did compromise always seem to lead to conflict? Well, that's the next one. And my best answer is this. Why is because there was an uncompromisable conflict between American ideals and American reality. You see, America, the United States of America, we started with the highest of ideals. You know the words by now. The Declaration of Independence, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I think I heard some of you saying it along with me. Good job. Now, those are the highest of human principles. Equality, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. Later in the Declaration, Thomas Jefferson put a slave grievance in. The slavery grievance, because if you remember in the Declaration, he listed all the ways that King George had violated our inalienable rights. And one of the ways he said is he started a slave trade here, and he started an economy. And he said he had carried and captivated a distant people from another hemisphere into slavery in this hemisphere, violating all their fundamental rights of life and liberty. He put it in as a way to exit from slavery, but the Continental Congress voted it out. So we made our statement of the highest of human ideals, but we did no action to rid ourselves of the lowest of human practices, slavery, and we kept that as our reality. 12 years later, we write a Constitution. The preamble says it all. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, and now I'm going to skip down, and secure the blessings of liberty, do ordain and establish this Constitution of the United States. Again, the highest of human principles. And they're saying it as we are dedicating ourselves to this on behalf of the people. But 10 lines later, Article 1, Section 2 says, and 3/5 of all other persons. Article 1, Section 9 says, the migration or importation of such persons. Importation of persons? And Article 4, Section 2 says that no person held to service or labor in one state, escaping into another. Escaping, why do you have to? Because person here means slave. And they can't be fugitives, they can't escape, they're still slaves. Persons here mean slaves, and they can be imported. And person here means slaves, and they're going to be counted for white representation as 3/5 a person. Again, we declared the highest of human principles, but the reality is that we kept our lowest of human practices, slavery. So, look at this balance. On the one side, you have equality, liberty, justice, pursuit of happiness, the highest of human principles. On this side of the balance is slavery. Can you have both? Can you compromise that? Let me illustrate. What if I said, I'm gonna compromise my breath, but maintain life? In other words, I'm not gonna breathe, but I'm gonna maintain life. Of course not. One requires the other. How do you maintain liberty but keep slavery? How do you maintain equality but own other people? And how is that just? How can the same things be in the same society? And I think we found out they can't. Because every time we tried to compromise our way through that, it led to more conflict. There's my explanation for compromise and conflict. I hope it helps some of you if you were doing this in your Unit 8 hearing. Either way, that's my first lesson. And I don't want to go too long because then it won't load up to YouTube. So, thanks. I'll be back in a minute with my second.